Welcome back to American Beef Ranch. My name is Jesse. Today I want to talk a little bit about fence because I got to go fix some fence. And honestly, today is the best day to do it because it's under 80 degrees. And anytime it's under 80 degrees, if you got to work on fence, that's the time to do it. Not when it's 80, 90, or 100. So let's run down here real quick, make sure I don't have any cows out, and get to working on fence. Unfortunately, I do have some cows out over here. I'm gonna go ahead and put them in before they run down over that way and get into the cornfield, because we can't have that. So I'm gonna open this gate, which is honestly, hold on. This gate is a problem, obviously. 4 wires and just an old wire gate. And yeah, they don't work very good. You should use real gates always. So as soon as we get down to these 3 cows, they're gonna run probably right up there and in. They know right where to go. It's always these 3, well, it's actually 2 yearling steers and 1 cow. They're always out. They are always the problem. It's always these 3. There could be some other ones may follow them every once in a while, but it's always these 3. And typically I would say to get rid of them.
So you see there we have a red cow. We got these 2 yearling steers, and look really good for being a short
but they're just a pain in the butt, and there is a couple reasons they're a pain in the butt. One is because they're cows, and it's just psychologically they're just how they're wired. And 2, they got a little taste of corn. They broke the fence down one day, the whole herd did, and got a taste of the corn, and now they know where the corn is, and the corn is toward home because they know home is that way, so they want to go there. But anyway, I told you they ran right up and in. They're gonna run back out there, and they'll probably be out again later unless we get the spot fixed that they're getting out at. But there's a lot of spots that need fixed, and I'm only gonna fix a couple right now because I need to go get some supplies. So we're having problems because of 2 main reasons. One, because of the condition of this fence for several reasons. And, well, really 3 main problems. 1, because of the condition of the fence. 2, because our hot wire is not working properly, and we'll talk about why. And 3 is because right behind you, there's 180 acres, 85 acres of corn, and the cows got out because this is right here's where the cows entered into the pasture. This is a pretty big pasture, about 200 acres out here. And this is where they entered in. So cows always naturally, we talked about physiologically, they always want to work back to where they came from. And they always like to walk the perimeter of the fence. So they always end up back up here pressing on this corner, which is no good. And so reason number 1 is this fence is very, very old. Like probably this wire is 50 years old. It's gotta be, it's super old. It's not in good shape. And this wire goes for, heck, how long? I think a mile. There's like a mile of fence here. Number 2, all of the corners and H braces are junk. You can see how old that wooden post is. There was no good gates. We have panels here where the gates are. The fence is not even hardly attached. At some point, somebody started putting in T-posts, took out the old wooden posts and put in T-posts that are down here. But when they did that, you can see how big the distance is from that T-post down to that T-post, and it's really significant. And in fact, let me go step that off. So the distance is at least 45 feet, if not longer, and that's super common on this fence. So generally T-posts at absolute like max should be only about 20 feet apart. And with this wire being so old like it is, like honestly these T-posts should be like 15 feet. So that means in that stretch that we just talked about, there should be 2 more posts really. And that's all along this fence, and it's about a mile worth of fence here. And you can see eventually this wire is old and gets stretched out because it's not high tensile wire, and the cows just go right over the top of it. So the best way that I've found to fix this kind of fence somewhat is to put a T-post right where they're going over the top of the fence and stretch it back out and kind of make it work. It's not a good fix. Honestly, this entire fence is gonna have to get pulled and get replaced. And we'll talk about that in a minute, because I thought I had a great idea, and it's still what we're gonna do, but we had to kind of redesign it a little bit. So, like I said, what I'm gonna do is just go ahead and put a T-post right here where those cows walk right through this fence, and hopefully keep them from doing the same thing twice. So the other thing I want to be mindful of is this fence. Like, there's no fixing it to be a long-term resource. This fence has got to be replaced. Like, there's no ifs, ands, buts about it. I probably have 10 miles of fence I need to replace. So about 60,000 feet. And with the new fencing system that I want to go with, that'll cost about 25 or 75 cents a foot, minus gates and corner braces. So we'll probably be $1 a foot when it's all said and done, but it's going to be so worth it when it's done. It's not even funny. And just like that, we have one more repair done on a junky fence. So this is another thing that I've done to kind of try to keep the cows in. There's an old hot wire that runs along this most of this fence. I went ahead and fixed all the parts that were there, and then I attached another piece of wire and went ahead and strung it out longer because our cows really respect hot wire. Hot wire works really, really good. So I went ahead and I put our solar fence charger because I'm nowhere near a power outlet. I really like plugging in fence chargers. It works better. But this solar charger I've had really good luck with. I've had 2 of these. This is a Zariba. It's up to 15 miles of fent or 0.18 output of joules. It works really good as a portable solar fence charger. What happens is, and why I've been rethinking my fence plan a little bit, is the fence charger works great. I have a good ground right here, but the ground is so dry that when an animal contacts it, it really doesn't give them a good shock because it doesn't ground well. It does not ground very well. And it doesn't ground very well because there's no moisture here in the ground, and there should be probably a couple more ground rods that are a lot longer and a lot deeper, but that will only get you so far. So what we plan on doing for fence is replacing all of our fence with the Timeless Fence PVC T-post and electric high tensile wire, because I've had high tensile net wire with barbs like this and cows rub on it and push on it. I've had 5 and 6 wire barbed wire fence, cows rub and push on it. And my goal with the Timeless Fence is a few things. 1, I think it looks good. I think it looks better than these fences. 2, electric fence really helps keep out with predators. And 3, the cows will not rub on it if it's hot all the time. And I think we'll be able to have a lot more docile control of our animals because they just know not to mess with it. But in saying that, because of the grounding problem I've had with this wire, we kind of rethought it a minute. But then after talking to some experts and talking to some good people, that when you run a multi-wire, so I plan on running 6 or 7 wires in the Timeless Fence solution, and I'll roll in a picture if you don't know what I'm talking about. But basically it's a T-post that's made out of PVC that has holes drilled in it, so you can run in a high tensile wire straight through the post. And it has a whole bunch of holes. You can roll in a whole bunch of wires. Currently, I think I'm planning on 7 wires that end up being about up to my shoulders. I'm 5'9", so about 5 foot tall fence. And every other wire would be a ground wire. So you would have 4 hot wires, basically with 3 ground wires in between them. And what that allows you to do is that you always have a good ground. So if an animal puts its head in between the fence, it's going to ground between those 2 wires, and you're always going to get a good shock. And you don't have to rely on the ground to give you a good shock. Now, when the fence charger is plugged in and where the fence charger's at, you're gonna have to have a set of, 8-foot ground rods, probably 5, 6, 7, 8 of them. But I've already got a spot planned out for that, and I plan on having 1 large charger or 2 larger chargers and splitting the property in a north and a south down our road here. So that's the other problem I'm having, is that I'm not getting a good ground here, and sometimes I get a good shock and they stay, and there's a lot less pressure on this fence behind me now. But unfortunately, it's not all the time, and it's not consistent. And so I have some cows, they just walk right through this. I've got a temporary fence set up here that you can see. They walk right through that, and typically they would never do that. At home, when I have a fence charger set up, plugged into my house, you know, plugged in with 120, they won't walk through it. So that's something else that we're kind of struggling with. And then just junk fence. I gotta run down here, I'm gonna check a few more things, and then we're gonna go change some water. And I figured I'd bring you guys along because I haven't brought you along in a while. And yeah, we'll just keep talking fence and cows, because I like fence and cows. Well, I like cows. Fence, I like having good fence. So I just checked the cow's mineral and I had to go through this gate. Another consideration for me personally, and how I want to build this fence, because I want to build this fence once and never have to build again. I'm 29 years old. I want this fence to be 50, 100-year fence. I don't want any gates to resemble a wire gate like the one behind me. These are junk, in my opinion, anymore. If you're building any kind of fence, this is not an option. You should not put these gates in. You might as well just spend the extra money and put in a real gate. And so what I intend to do personally is at any of the corners or any of the H braces, because there should be a brace here for these wires, at any of those points we will have steel oil-filled pipe H braces. I don't know what size, at least 2 7/8, and we'll have, when possible, double 16-foot steel gates that can chain and lock if we want to. The reason I want to do that is because I liked it. The gates are better, and I want such a big opening is because I farm, and my farm grows, and as my farm grows, equipment grows, and I may have spots where there's fields and tractors and equipment that I need to get them into a certain spot, and I want to be able to do that easily, and 32 feet usually will do that for me. So the problem with that is that electricity will ground out in that fence, right? And in those H braces, you won't be able to get across. So what I like to do is we'll take a large insulated wire, like a 10-gauge insulated wire, and where the wires terminate on insulators, we'll run that wire underground to the other side and connect it back to the fence. That way the fence is continuous all the time, 100% of the fence. And honestly, I think it's gonna look really good with those white T-posts, 15 foot apart, with the nice high tensile wires attached to the H braces. Something's gonna be in the H brace, I don't know what yet, but then having a nice steel gate. I just think it's gonna look really nice. And then obviously welded up and capped and looking really good. So I need to just switch my water, but I have to do it in a specific order, because while I switch water, there's actually less water that needs to be pumped at a certain point. So if I was to leave all my pumps on, I could overpressure the system. I don't want to do that. If you can see over there, that pivot's the one that we need to shut off first. So first thing I'm going to do is shut off one of my pumps with this little switch panel. So I have 3 pumps, that kills one of them. That helps lower the amount of water that we're actually pushing. And I'm going to go around the other way because there's a flood there. And so I shut off that pump right there. We're going to walk over to this valve. This valve runs to that pivot. And we're going to, now you can see that valve shut. That pivot is shut off. And now what I do is go to my pivot I need to start, and I'll turn the valves on and start it, shut another valve off, and then I can come back here and start the pump that I shut off. And it stinks that I have to come back here and do all that, but it's just part of having a mechanical system. If I had everything if I could run it with GPS off my phone, I would be able to just start and stop everything on my phone, and I wouldn't have to turn anything off or any of that stuff or do any of the running around. I could just start it on my phone, and then it would also tell me if I had a problem. So to the pivot point we go. Made it to the pivot point. So I have 1 larger pivot and 3 smaller pivots in my rotation. And so this pipe comes out here to the big pivot, and then it runs to another pivot over there. So No, first things first, I'm gonna open the valve here for the big pivot. And then we'll shut the valve for that other pivot. And as far as stopping the other pivots, 2 of them are half pivots and they stop on pivot stops, so I don't have to go out there and manually like stop them. The other one is run on GPS. I do have one on GPS, so I just stop it with my phone. I already did that. So now we're running water up here. So on these older pivots, or this is what a pivot panel looks like. You have your on and off power. So now I have power here. You have your forward reverse switch. Is how you start the pivot. You have your percent timer. So pivots run based off percent time, which is the end tower moves at 20% is where I have it set right now. And 20% is 20% of a minute. So for every minute the pivot's on, 20% of the time it's moving. So it's like 12 seconds it'll move for every minute. And so all I do is click that on, and then this right here, this light came on, telling me the safety circuit is on now. And in a minute, this light right here will click on and it'll tell me that the last tower is moving. So I usually, obviously you want the safety circuit, you have to have the safety circuit, you want it lit up, and now you see the last tower light is lit up right there. And so those are the 2 lights, the safety circuit and the last tower light. And that last tower light, it'll go off here in just a second, just like that. And so our pivot is properly moving. So now what I do is I go back down Corn Alley here, back to the pumps, shut another valve off, and click the pump back on. And then we're gonna run it to the end of this pivot and make sure everything's working like it should. Okay, so back at the pump station, like I said, 1 valve, this guy right here. Okay, that helped. And then we're gonna kick this pump back on. Looking at my pressure gauge, we're up to our operating pressure that we should be to make sure that the right amount of water goes on the crop. And now we're gonna drive about a mile, or a little more than a mile, up to where the end of the big pivot is and make sure it's running like it should. So we're up here at the end of the pivot, and I don't know if you can tell, I'll zoom in and let you see it, but we got a couple plug birds, so let's jump up there and get those fixed. So there's no way around this, you're gonna get wet, so you might as well just run up in here and just get it taken care of. Yep, corn definitely thirsty, glad we got here. Ah! Okay. Got you guys on a magnet so you can see. All right. I don't know if you guys noticed that or not, but just how nasty that water is. One of the major problems we have is this pivot desperately needs an upgrade. If you'll notice, the drop comes out of the side of the pipe. Modern pivots come out of the top of the pipe. That keeps the entire system so much cleaner. On top of that, we need to add a filter system to help keep all the junk out. Our corn unfortunately really suffered because we didn't keep the sprinklers clean enough, and I would literally have to crawl up here every day probably and clean the sprinklers, and sometimes you just don't get to it. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching.